Is there today a man among the white races who has eyes to see what is going on around him on the face of the globe? To see the immensity of the danger which looms over this mass of peoples? I do not speak of the educated or uneducated city crowds, the newspaper readers, the herds who vote at elections, and for that matter there is no longer any quality difference between voters and those for whom they vote, but of the ruling classes of the white nations, insofar as they have not been destroyed, of the statesmen, insofar as there are any left, of the true leaders of policy, of economic life, of armies and of thought. Does anyone, I ask, see over and beyond his time, his own continent, his country, or even the narrow circle of his own activities? We live in momentous times. The stupendous dynamism of the historical epoch that has now dawned makes it the grandest, not only in the Faustian civilization of Western Europe, but, for that very reason, in all world history. Greater, and by far more terrible than the ages of Caesar and Napoleon. Yet how blind are the human beings over whom this mighty destiny is surging, whirling them in confusion, exalting them, destroying them. Who among them sees and comprehends what is being done to them and around them? What, indeed, does any one of them know of the direction in which his very own destiny is facing? All we have is a number of absurd catchwords, such as overcoming the economic crisis, understanding of peoples, national security and self-sufficingness, with which to overcome catastrophes within the space of a generation or two. What short-sightedness and noisy superficiality reigns among us, and how provincial the standpoint when major problems emerge. All parties now think and act as though they had the world to themselves. Trade unions see no further than the industrial area. Colonial policy has always been odious to them, because it does not fit in with the scheme of class war. In their dogmatic narrowness, they do not, or will not, comprehend that it was precisely the working man for whom the economic imperialism of the years round 1900, with its assured facilities for the sale of products and the purchase of raw materials, was the basic premise of existence. This the English workman had long before grasped. Added to all this is the universal dread of reality. We so-called pale faces have it, all of us, although we are seldom, and most of us never, conscious of it. It is the spiritual weakness of the late man of the higher civilizations, who lives in his cities cut off from the peasant and the soil, and thereby from the natural experiencing of destiny, time and death. He has become too wide awake, too accustomed to ponder perpetually over yesterday and tomorrow, and cannot bear that which he sees and is forced to see, the relentless course of things, senseless change, and real history striding pitilessly through the centuries into which the individual, with his tiny scrap of private life, is irrevocably born at the appointed place. That is what he longs to forget, refute or contest. He takes flight from history into solitude, into imaginary faraway systems, into some faith or another, or into suicide. Like a grotesque ostrich, he buries his head in hope, ideals and cowardly optimism. It is so, but it ought not to be, therefore it is otherwise. We sing in the woods at night because we are afraid. Similarly, the cowardice of cities shouts its apparent optimism to the world for very fear. Reality is no longer to be borne. The wish picture of the future is set in place of facts, although fate has never taken any notice of human fancies. From the children's land of do-nothing, to the world peace and workers' paradise of the grown-ups. Little as one knows of events in the future, for all that can be got from a comparison of other civilizations is the general form of future facts and their march through the ages. So much is certain. The forces which will sway the future are no other than those of the past. These forces are the will of the strong, healthy instincts, race, the will to possession and power, while justice, happiness and peace, those dreams which will always remain dreams, hover ineffectively over them. In our own civilization, since the 16th century, it has rapidly grown more impossible for more of us to gain a general view of the ever more confusing events and situations of world politics and economics, or to grasp, let alone control, the forces and tendencies at work in them. true statesmen become rarer and rarer. It is only now that this instinct has become so weak, and a voluble criticism of blithe ignorance so strong, as to make it more and more likely that a true statesman, with a real knowledge of things, will not receive this instinctive support, even at the level of grudging tolerance, but will be prevented from doing what has to be done by the opposition of the no-betters. Frederick the Great experienced the first of these types of opposition. Bismarck almost fell a victim to the second. Only later generations, and not even they, can appreciate the grandeur and creativeness of such leaders. We are still in the age of rationalism, which began in the 18th century, and is now rapidly nearing its close. We are all its creatures, whether we know and wish it or not. It is the arrogance of the urban intellect which, detached from its roots and no longer guided by strong instincts, looks down with contempt on the full-blooded thinking of the past and the wisdom of an ancient peasant stock. It is the period in which everyone can read and write and therefore must have his say and always knows better. This type of mind is obsessed by concepts, the new gods of the age, and it exercises its wits on the world as it sees it. It is often given a label, human progress, and now that it has a name, it is. Those who doubt it are narrow reactionaries, heretics, and, what is worse, persons devoid of democratic virtue. Away with them. In this wise, the fear of reality was overcome by intellectual arrogance, the darkness that comes from ignorance of all things of life, spiritual poverty, lack of reverence, and finally, world-alien stupidity. For there is nothing stupider than the rootless urban intellectual.